Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Talk Busy with Lizzy podcast. I'm your host, Lizzy, and as always, we have another special guest. Her name is Shae. Shae is a foster parent from Idaho, and today we talk all things foster parenting, foster care, and we get to hear her story through all of this. So without further ado, I'll let Shae share her story. So excited to share this one. So let's get into it.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yes, I'm so glad it finally worked out.
So, are you good if we just jump right into questions?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, sounds great. So, how long have you been fostering for?
Yeah, my husband and I started the process like right before COVID hit. And so it was 2020, and we were the first class that had to have training on Zoom. And they were kind of trying to like figure all of the logistics of that out. And so, yeah, it's been about 4 years now. And it's been a lot of ups and downs, but it's been really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. What made you want to foster?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird thing. I get asked this a lot, and it's always such a like a boring answer, but we just both always felt like that was something we were supposed to do. Like we were called to do that. And we had some conversations when we were both dating, that someday we would like to foster or help in that capacity. And then we were church leaders in our kids' church for a while when we were newly married, and there were some kids in foster care that would attend. And we were like, wow, like we could help these kids. We don't have kids of our own, and we have the space, and maybe we'll do that someday. And so fast forward, I'm a believer. And so God was like, that's not how this is going to go. You're not going to wait till you have your own kids. You're going to just go with a different plan. So yeah, it was just kind of something we always felt like we were supposed to do. We didn't know anyone that had done it. We were never really involved in that world until we decided to jump in together.
Oh, that's awesome. How did those conversations go? Like, what are some of the things you guys talked about?
Yeah, I mean, when you're dating someone, you're, okay, how many kids do you want to have? And like, would you homeschool or would you, all of those kinds of things. So as we're talking about those kinds of conversations, trying to get to know each other and see if we're compatible, I had talked about, I would really be open to like adoption someday or fostering. I've always really, really loved kids, and I always wanted to have a lot of kids. And he was like, yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And we just discussed that, it'd be great to kind of have our own children and ease into learning how to be parents and grow in that capacity before handling other people's children. It didn't work out that way, but that's kind of where we were starting at. And then we took a little bit of an off-road tour to get there, but
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. How many kids have you fostered and have you adopted any?
yeah, great question. I like to count in all of the kids that come into my home. So like even if it was just a few hours, even if it was because you just never know how long it's going to be. And so we started off doing respite care for these two sisters, and they were the sweetest girls. We had them for just respite while their foster mom was on vacation, and it was a great way to dip our toe into what that would look like to be a foster parent. We went crazy. Like we bought them all these clothes and things and like just like spoiled them like crazy. And it was awesome. They were really sweet. And then it was not long after that that we received the call for a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old who they said might need adopted someday, but it's kind of up in the air. And we went and met them. They were living in another town and drove down there about 2 hours away, and we were like, yeah, we'll take them. They had been bounced from home to home to home, unfortunately, and at a very young age, it was very traumatic. They came to live with us and would spend about 3.5 years, and they're still here. And we adopted them in January of 2023. So it's been great. They were with us for 2.5 years before we adopted them, and we got to see them grow up and um, make such huge huge progress in their development and their growth, and it's been amazing. And so since we had them, or while we had them, we did respite for a few other kiddos. So we had a teenager for a while, multiple times. We had her in our home, and then we had a 5-year-old for a couple times, and then we had actually yesterday we had an 8-year-old for a while.
Oh, wow.
So kind of just helping out here and there, but they were our really first long-term placement, and then they ended up just staying forever. So we've been on a break for a while because I had my baby, we adopted the kids, we were moving, and so just actually today we got the approval that we're no longer on break, and so we'll be getting more and more calls.
That's so exciting. That's
Yeah.
awesome. For respite care, do you, did you do it? How am I wording this? Um, with your training, were you able to do respite care because you were already approved to be a foster parent?
Yeah, so it does depend on the state you live in because some states do have different rules around this. But my state, um, respite care, if it's more than 72 hours long that you have the child, then you do need to be a licensed foster parent. So it's the same exact training as a foster parent would have. But if it's under 72 hours, there's something called RPPS, or the Reasonable Prudent Parenting Standards. And that allows the foster parent to kind of make that decision as if it was their own child. So they could say, hey, I would leave my own child with a babysitter for the weekend, like a grandma or something. And so I can do that with a child that's in foster care in my home. Same with, going on a boat ride or um, riding a horse. They can make those decisions where in the past it was every little thing like that. You had to have approval by the state. And it was really cumbersome for a lot of kids and families because they just ended up not being able to do those things. And so now that standard has been in place and it's been great. So I could leave my kids with my parents for the weekend and I wouldn't need approval for that. But if I'm going to go on a trip for a week or go out of state, then that's when you need that licensed foster parent to step in and help with respite.
Awesome, thank you. Because I've always been curious about that and what that looks like.
Yeah,
Um, I talked to, do you know who Tori Hope Peterson is?
I don't
Okay, so
know.
she was a former foster youth and she's written a book which I read, it's beautiful. But she was talking about that law where it was like she wasn't it was right kind of after she had aged out, and so
Yeah.
she as a foster youth was not able to do a lot of things
Yeah.
that like she's like I'm so glad that now a lot of these kids are able to get involved in more things because what like before it was you were so like yeah I guess like dependent on getting that approval all the time and for every small thing, and so that's awesome.
Yeah. Something as simple as an hour boat ride. And then, there was even making them wear like life jackets. Even if it was a 17-year-old teenage girl, she had to wear a life jacket. Like, and now that's like, okay, up to that foster parent to make that decision. So I'm glad as well that that's in place.
Yeah, awesome. um what oh I already asked the question. Sorry.
Okay.
Is there a story that you can or want to share from fostering?
Yeah. I mentioned about how we did respite for a teen for a few times. And it's just a really cool story. And the reason I like to tell it is because I think it shows other people that you don't necessarily need to be a foster parent who has kids in their house all the time in order to make a difference. And so this young girl came to us when she was 13, when we were supposed to just have her a few days. And she had come from another home and experienced a lot of trauma. And she did not know how to bathe herself. She didn't know about hygiene or her health. She also struggled with diabetes. So there was so much that she didn't know how to do for herself. And at 13 years old, a lot of 13-year-olds in a typical home would know these things, but she didn't because she didn't have someone to take that time and teach her. And so just that weekend while she was at my house, we had so many conversations. I just made it known to her that she could ask me any question, that I don't get uncomfortable, I don't get awkward or weird about questions, that she should be able to ask someone that and have someone in her life to do that with. And so I taught her. I mean, she was in the shower and I poked my head in the door and I said, hey, everything good? And she said, yeah, I just don't really know what I'm doing. And I said, hey, that's fine. Are you cool if I sit in here and walk you through it? And I sat on the ground outside the shower and just talked her through step by step how to wash her hair, how to wash her body. And I'm hopeful that that's something that, she can carry with her throughout her life and feel confident in caring for herself. And that was multiple years ago. She actually turned 16 on Monday, this last Monday. And I talk with her all the time. She's moved from home to home, a lot of things. She's actually looking for an adoptive home right now. So if anyone wants information on her, I'm happy to share. But yeah, she's just a great kid, and she ended up going to a group home, and we maintained contact with her, and we would pick her up every Sunday and take her to church and take her to lunch and take her back to her group home, and she'd spend holidays with us, so she didn't have to be in her group home for, Christmas and Thanksgiving and Halloween. And there's little things like that where you can take one day a week to find a kiddo like her who's in a group home capacity or doesn't have family, and you can invest in them in that way. And I didn't have to be a licensed foster parent to do that. That's something that I did because of that connection I had with her, but anyone can do something like that. So I really like to share that story about the difference that you can make in kids' lives as a person who's not a foster parent.
That's really beautiful because I think that's so true. And I'm always looking for ways to share with people of how to do that as just like a normal person who's not necessarily like a foster parent. And so it's really a great way for people to get involved. And also just, I've heard a lot of stories similar to hers where it's just like, okay, they don't like, from actual like former foster youth being like, I didn't know how to like what hygiene was, what I was supposed to do. And so the fact that you were there and had those like, I'm open for any question you have, like I think is so important because I also have heard of it's so difficult to come and ask that question
Yes.
and be like, admit that you don't know. And I think, I mean, for anyone, it's hard to admit that you don't know something and to ask for that help. So that's really beautiful that you've formed that relationship with her. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what do you see as the biggest obstacle facing foster youth?
This is such a tough one because there are so many. And it's really, really unfortunate that our government doesn't have any sort of system in place to really support these kids that are aging out, or even kids that they get adopted and then they turn 18 and maybe they don't have a great relationship with their adoptive parents. Like I hear about that a lot as well. So it's really, really hard. I think there's a big lack of resources for them. There's not a lot. I mean, I don't know about if this is maybe just a my state and area thing or if it is like nationwide, but there's such a long wait list for so many services when it comes to therapies and things like that. So here, I mean, you could be on a list for a year plus and not be able to get in. And these are the kids that need it the most. They need to work through the trauma they've been through and have someone to help them with that development piece. And so I see that as a huge barrier, is that there's not enough resources out there, and the resources that are out there, they're not easily accessed. And so for me, I think that's, at least where I'm located, that's something that I'm seeing. And then just that lack of support for the kids that are aging out. There's no organization that's nationwide that I know of that's helping those kids. I know there's a couple local things, like at least where I'm at, but it's all monetary help, which is great. And I'm not belittling that at all because that's a huge, huge help to people. But they really need that relational piece as well to help them with learning the actual skills that come with being an adult.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm really big on that, like having that community to be around someone to help because you get way more help when you're in community than if it's just someone outside being like, "Oh, this is what you need." And it's like, "Not really, but thanks." You know?
Yeah.
Um, do you know of are there any organizations that you have either used or know of that have been very helpful?
Yeah, where I'm located, there's an organization called Safety Net. They work in Idaho and Washington State. Again, they're that financial piece, which is fantastic. I've worked with them to help get a teen I know like a car, and things like that. So huge help. We did have a program here in Idaho that was all about teaching children those life skills. So it started from the age like 13 or 14, and then they could stay in that program till up to 26 years old. And they would teach them, how to register for college, how to make a resume and apply for a job, and it was more of that actual development mentoring piece that I was talking about. But our state recently cut that program because they're in so much debt right now with the government. So just in April, that program ended, and all of those teens now no longer have that resource in my state. So that's a really big detriment to the kids in my area. I don't know if other states have that, but yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's really difficult. Yeah. Um, what is the best part about being a foster parent, and what's the most difficult part about being a foster parent?
Yeah, I like to say that when you're fostering, the highs are so high and the lows are so low. Both of those are so intense when you're in those moments, and it really is like the peaks and the valleys. The peaks for me have been, of course, the children. When you can see them grow and make steps. Say they struggle with a certain behavior, and every time, they don't get what they want, they do this or something. The day that they finally, oh, they didn't react that way, or I could see there was some growth in this area. That's so, so cool to see, because it just is like proof that the love that you're pouring into these kids and the care that you're showing them is making a difference in their lives and their development. And so, I really have enjoyed seeing that in both my kids that I've adopted. They had a lot of trauma. I mean, they still do have a lot of trauma, and they'll carry that with them forever. But the growth that I've seen in them has been tremendous, and that is the best part. Watching my foster daughter at the time learn to ride a bike and tie her shoe and things like that is just those little wins. Just really, for me, they're not so little. They're great. The hardest part, and I think most foster parents would agree, is working within the system, because our system in the United States is so broken and it doesn't work in the way that it should all of the time. And so that's the biggest piece for me, is working within this system where you don't always get the information that you need, you don't always get the support that you need from the Department of Health and Welfare, because they're so busy, because there's so many children in care and their caseloads are so big that they're not able to devote all of that time to each individual case. So that's what we're seeing, at least where I'm located. And it's nothing against them. They're great caseworkers, but they just have so much on their plates and there's not enough of them. And so that's really, really tough when you're not able to get responses or you're not given information that's accurate. You're kind of flying in the dark, and that's a really tough place to be for a lot of people, is that unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you had to experience anything with like the turnover rate of social workers and caseworkers?
Yeah, I absolutely did. My kiddos had a caseworker before they came to me. I was their fourth home, so they had really bounced quite a bit in the first 6 months of them being in care. During that time, they had another caseworker that I actually never met. By the time they came to me, they were on caseworker number 2. She was with us for several months, not quite a year, and she moved away and then didn't even continue in that line of work at all. And she was a new caseworker, so I've been hearing about that happening as well. And then her supervisor had to take over for a time, and then she actually went into a different a different area of work as well. And so for the last probably 5 or 6 months of our case being open before adoption, we actually didn't have a caseworker at all, because they thought, well, you're almost going to adopt them, so it's probably not worth assigning a new one for just a short time. So we just kind of went with it. At that point, it was like, I'm almost done. I'm not going to raise a stink about it. But my kiddos had 1, 2, 3, and should have had 4. So that's just one case.
Yeah, that's really difficult. So I started off as a social work major in college. Decided to switch because I realized what I wanted to do was more the volunteer and advocating side of things than the actual like being a social worker side.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that they really talk about is how bad the turnover rate is. And so we did a lot. Our teacher really was like ingraining in us the like, okay, you need to take a self-care day. Like you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself because otherwise you're going to burn out so fast in this line of work. And so I've heard from teachers, from like foster youth, foster parents that like that is a huge issue in the system.
I think that's a necessity. I think that caring for yourself, it is so neglected by so many people. It's foster parents and caseworkers. I think it's a necessity for both. And they're always saying, take that time for yourself. But then people are like, oh, I've got it, I've got it. And then by the time they're like, oh, I really do need help, it's too late a lot of the time. So I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah, he would ask us every because I had class Tuesday, Thursday. So on Tuesdays he'd be like, "So this weekend, what did you guys do for self-care?" And so we'd like all go around and say it. And then on Thursdays he'd be like, "Okay, this weekend, what are you gonna do?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I loved that. He was such a great teacher.
That's a really good point. And that self-care is just it's so important and that because the secondhand trauma that caseworkers and foster parents are hearing and experiencing, it really does affect you. It didn't happen to us, that trauma didn't happen to us, but having to hear about that happening to people that you care about and grow attached to, it's draining on you and it's mentally, debilitating at times. So important.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's so important for people to, if they need to get trained in their state or not, but be like having respite care workers and just like being open for that, um, is absolutely, I feel like a necessity and something that has always interested me in getting involved in.
Yeah.
And so I think I love that like people are talking more about that now because I don't think it really was talked about before.
Yes.
Um, what do you think all prospective foster parents should know?
So I work kind of in the foster system as well. I recruit foster parents, and so I also am in charge of overseeing like the retention piece of all the foster parents in my region. So one of the things that I'm always telling the new foster parents who are going through training, I go and I do a presentation to them, and the biggest thing I want them to take away from my presentation is the importance of their foster community and their village is to really utilize them because going through this will feel like you are completely on your own on a deserted island with no one around to help you because it's isolating because the things you're going through it's confidential. You can't share with your best friend, you can't share with your mom or your dad or your siblings. You can't tell them all the ins and out of what you're experiencing. So finding the people who get what you're going through, other foster parents, is so important. In my state, we have mentors. And every foster parent in my region has a mentor, and I oversee them. And I always am saying, go to your mentor because there's no confidentiality there. Is having that one person that you can share everything about this case with, all of the things that bother you and frustrate you and are exciting and good too. Having that one person you can talk to and being involved in community events with other foster parents, getting to know them. When you build those connections, you have someone available for respite and you trust them and know them because you met them at a park day and you bonded and your children had already met each other and then you feel comfortable leaving for a weekend and getting some rest. So making sure they utilize all of those resources when it comes to the village and the people that are there to support them through the journey. I don't just say that I recommend it. I say that it's vital. I do not think that people can be successful at fostering just completely doing it themselves. I just don't think it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your work doing that, is that through the state or is that like an organization? What is that like?
Yeah, we're an organization, but the state contracts with us. So they contract us to recruit foster parents, train them in foster parent training, and then retain them and support them after they're licensed. So it's kind of one all-encompassing thing. So, we're out at community events like farmers markets, passing out flyers and answering people's questions. We hold presentations at churches and different groups. And then we host monthly events for all the foster families as well, game nights or park days, things like that, just to try to bring them support and help them grow in community with each other.
That's really awesome. What's that organization called?
It's Fostering Idaho.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah,
I love also that like retaining aspect because I think in a lot of so many different situations in life, you especially I think in the church too, it's like, okay, well now you're a part of it, cool. And then there's like
yeah,
no sense of discipleship specifically for the church, and then in this case of like that communities and that piece of like checking in, making sure everything's going well. And
yeah.
so I think that is such an important thing and really great that you guys do that.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. I think that retention is almost more important than the recruitment piece because it's so much easier to retain someone you have than it is to go out and find someone new who wants to do this. So I think it's overlooked a lot of the time, but I think the stat is like 50% of foster parents quit after 1 year of fostering. And so it's like, well, what if we could get that number down? We wouldn't need to recruit as many people.
Yeah. What is one thing you want to tell people who don't know much about foster care?
I think I would want them to know that it's not as scary as they think. I think a lot of people they have very specific fears, and I know these because people are always commenting them on my posts and things and saying I couldn't do that because this. And the number like top like three things I hear, I couldn't do that because I don't want to give them back. I would get too attached. It would be too hard. That's like the number one thing that I hear. The second one is people are scared because they're saying, well, I can't have a kid in my house for 2, 3 years. I don't know how long it would go, and that's a really big commitment. And the other one is people hear so many horror stories of situations where children had such crazy behaviors that they burned their house down or things like that. And those are so few and far between. And I think people, the movies and everything portrays foster care as such a negative thing, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I really hope that the world can start talking about it in such a brighter and lighter way because it really isn't this dark, scary thing. It's a beautiful thing to be able to care for a child. And even if you only have them for a day, show them like the best day ever, have so much fun with them. And being able to see them reunified with their families, families coming back together again and being whole and healed. It's beautiful. So I think I would want people to know that our pain of losing those kids is worth it to help them. I'm not scared to grieve, but I am scared of what happens if I don't step up to help that child. And so for me, that's the biggest thing I'm telling people is that I'm okay going through some pain if it'll help them.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful and such a like selfless thing. And I think so important for people to realize is that, you know, it's important to to give it's important for them. Like
Mhm.
allowing yourself to take that step back and be like, no, like these children are hurting, they've had trauma, and they need that person to step up. And yes, it's not going to be easy for you, but it's also not, yeah, not as bad as necessarily the movies are going to make it sound.
Yeah,
Um, so just like that balance and understanding like what true the sacrifice it is going to take, but also how rewarding that sacrifice is because of the life that you are helping. Um,
absolutely.
what have you ever watched the movie Instant Family?
Oh yeah.
All right,
Oh
what are your thoughts on that one?
yeah, it was so funny. I watched that actually before I became a foster parent. I had actually inquired about it a few years before, and it took several years to actually complete where I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. But I was interested for a few years. And we went to the movies and watched it. And I just remember leaving going, okay, we can't wait any longer. Like, we need to go and do that. I feel that it was portrayed in a good way, to be honest. And I think a lot of people who are on my professional team of training foster parents and working with foster parents would agree with that. Obviously, it's not perfect. It is a movie, but for the most part, there's even some clips that we use in our foster parent training from that movie. And I feel like it's a very powerful movie. I can't really watch it nowadays because I get too emotional. So I sometimes I'm in the mood to watch it. My husband's like, "Do you really want to cry for an hour tonight?" It's powerful. It's emotional. Yeah.
I love it. And so I wanted, but I'm not a foster parent, so I wanted to like get that perspective. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I have another question for you, just about what do your well now your adopted kids, your kids. I don't even want to like necessarily put that label because they're yours. But do they have a relationship at all with their biological parents?
Yeah, it's something that it depends on the state you're in. So some states have closed adoption, open adoption, some states have requirements and some don't. My state is a closed adoption state. However, it is up to the foster parent or adoptive parent to kind of make that decision. The judge usually gives a recommendation on what they feel is best. But it is solely up to me now that they're my legal children. So the judge did say, he did not recommend contact. However, I do feel for their foster or for their biological parents, and I know that they love their children. And while my son was, of course, 1 year old, he doesn't have a relationship, but my daughter does remember being with them and living with them. And so I maintain a connection with them via email. I send them about every other month. I send them photos and kind of just a written update of, they had basketball or this performance, things like that. They're not in a position where it's safe for my children to communicate. There's still some illegal activities and things like that happening. But if that was something that would change in the future, I'm open to changing things as they change. And so if progress is made on their end, progress can be made towards the children talking with them. I'm not opposed to that at all. It's just my biggest concern and my biggest goal is to protect my children, of course.
Absolutely.
And so I don't want to hide them from anything, but I also don't want to put them in a position to be hurt. So it's a really hard decision to make. And I hope that I'm making the right one. And I hope that someday my children will understand the decision I make and that it'll be good for them. But it is a tough one.
Yeah. And I love that you do have that, that still communication with them, but also, using your discernment to know that like, okay, now's not the time though that they get to connect. I always find it interesting just because I know that there are some cases where people completely cut off all, even if it wasn't necessarily a
Negative. Yeah.
they're more scared of like, oh, they're gonna take the child and stuff like that than like actually it being a real danger. And so I just am always interested in hearing. My boyfriend is adopted, but he was never in foster care. But they have an open adoption. And so I've
Oh,
met his biological family and like we see them twice a year. So I always
oh.
just am interested in hearing other people's stories on that.
Yeah, well, and I probably should have mentioned too that they do have multiple siblings. And my children are quite young, but all their siblings are 17 to 24 or something like that. And so there is one sibling who lives near us who has in the past expressed interest in having a relationship with the kids. And we jumped right on that. And we see her all the time. We had her over Christmas morning and invite her to the kids' soccer games and basketball games. And so we're super close with her and help her, through and helped her get her driver's license and things like that. And so they're half siblings, so they share one of the same parents. But I'm hopeful that that relationship with their biological sister will also help with kind of that missing piece of who they are and who their family is that if they can maintain that with her, that will help, that they're not able to have that with other members of their family.
Yeah. That's really cool that they are able to have that relationship and that you're fostering that is so
Yeah.
awesome. Um, how you we were kind of talking about respite care and that kind of thing, but how can people best help foster families who aren't necessarily looking to be a foster parent or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually just made like a flyer about this today. I think the top ways that you can support a foster family is, be praying for them. That's huge. Supporting them in small ways, even it might seem insignificant to the person that's doing it, but I guarantee you that doing tiny things like a simple text, hey, thinking about you today, please let me know if there's anything I can do for you. And a lot of people don't want to accept help, right? They're like, I've got this. I signed up for this. I can do this on my own. But it does take a village to raise a child. And so sometimes being a little bit forceful in the sense that, hey, I'm bringing you dinner on Friday night. Please let me know if you want Wendy's or McDonald's. I mean, it could be that simple. Or I'm going to come over and do a task for an hour. Let me know if laundry or dishes is going to be more helpful versus can I help you with anything? Because it's so broad and it's hard for people to say, well, what I really need help with is laundry, but I'm not going to ask them that, right? But if you don't really make it an option and you say, I'm going to help you with this, I'm going to come over and rake your leaves and mow your lawn because I know that's the last thing on your mind with everything you have going on. That's huge. So tasks like that, the text check-ins, things like that, remembering what dates are important. If there's a court hearing coming up and that foster parent's nervous, checking in with them before, checking in with them after. They can't tell you all the specifics, but just saying, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here for you and I'm here to support you through this, and you're doing a good thing and you're helping change lives and families. And so I think that's the biggest thing people can do. And then, like you said, the bigger sense, doing respite care, providing free babysitting, hey, once a month, I'm going to watch your kids for 2 hours so you can go out to dinner with your spouse or with your friends. That's huge. And it's low commitment for the person doing it, and super helpful for the family that's receiving it.
Yeah. Awesome. How can we be praying for you specifically?
I guess just as we're jumping back into having more kids here, it's been a long time since I've gotten those phone calls saying we've got a kid this age that's been through this. And some of the things that I'm hearing these kids have gone through, it is really affecting me. It's really hard to hear such horrible stories and horrible situations that kids are coming from. And so just praying that our hearts are open, and we're not scared to lean into that, and that it's okay to feel those feelings, but that we don't let that pain that they're going through overtake us to where we're too scared to say yes to those situations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be praying for you, and I know my listeners will be too. So thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time talking with you.
Yeah, it was so great to talk with you, and I'm excited for what you're doing here. It seems like a great way to support the foster community, and we could use as much support as possible. So good work.
Thank you. I know I did a whole series last May and June on foster care. I had quite a few foster youth and former foster youth come on, and then I had on one of them is also currently a foster parent, so that was cool. So has been in foster care and is now a foster mom. And then I had on two ladies who one was a founder and one is like the runner of an organization. So yeah, it was really cool to talk to them and get to know them. And I definitely, because May's Foster Care Awareness Month, as you probably know. But I really am like want to put an emphasis on it doesn't just end at the end of May. Like it's something that is going on with kids all year long. And so to like really have it in the back of our minds all year long. And so I want to have like more throughout the year than just like that one little series. And I have a few friends who've been in the foster care system, so I've had one of them was on in the series last year, and then one just came on, and her episode will come out I think in August. So
Great.
yeah,
Fantastic. Well,
exciting.
good work, and I'm happy for you, and I wish you the best of luck with all of this.
Thank you so much. And I'll be praying for you. And so exciting that you're opening up your home again to more kids and all that stuff. So, and what you do is also great. I love seeing your posts and stuff. So,
Thanks. I appreciate that. It was really nice to meet you, and I hope we can stay in touch.
yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend.
You too.
I'm so grateful that I got to have Shae on the podcast. She is such a light, and talking to her was really, really insightful. I hope you guys took from it as much as I did. Make sure that, you are supporting the foster parents in your life in whatever way that you can. Like we were talking about, respite care is such a great way, but just letting parents know that you are there for them and what they need as they help these children. So let's be praying for Shae. Go follow her on Instagram. I'll link that in the show notes below. If you want to support the podcast, the best way is to share this episode and to join our Patreon. Our Patreon, you have an extra episode every single week, and I'm wanting to host more discussions on there. So that is the goal with that. Make sure you join. It's $5 a month and really helps me to make this podcast my full-time job. Another way is obviously just prayer and following us on all socials: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, our blog, Patreon, Twitter, or I guess X, Threads, whatever. I post a lot on all those, so make sure you are following along. And then also buying from companies that support us. So the first one is Elevated Faith. They are a Christian clothing company, and I love them because I've gotten to have so many conversations with people about the Lord based off of the clothing and the stickers and the bracelets and whatever, which I think is so amazing. Another one is Dwell, which is another Christian clothing company. I have the cutest little cup from them though. So they have all things different for apparel. I think that they have such a cute and fun little things. Another one that we have is Operate Beauty. They have such cool Pilates stuff. If you're into Pilates, I am. They also have stuff to help you, like your face and health, while like skin health, while being like a Pilates and wellness company, which is so cool. Another one that we have is 28 Co, which is an app that I absolutely love. I use it all the time. It is a cycle syncing app. And with cycle syncing, like this is something we did not learn in school that we should have learned in school. And so you learn about each phase of your cycle on this app. You track your period, you get workouts and recipes and grocery lists. It's so cool. I've learned so much, and your insight is literally to the specific day of your cycle. So that's so cool. Another one, and our last one, is Cowboy Colostrum. Colostrum is a superfood, and this helps you with immune health, your nail, hair health, and so many other things. So go check all those out. All of them are linked below, just like all of the podcast stuff is linked below and Shae stuff. So go check it out. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you guys for next week's episode.